Okay, everyone, welcome to Buffy Boys. Nearly forgot the name of the podcast there for a second. Don't know what I was going to call it, but I am very excited about this episode because we are watching and reviewing episode 7 of season 1, Angel, which is...
Oh, it's written by... Oh my god, my voice sounds awful. It is written by David Greenwatt and directed by Scott Brazil. And I have some information about those two people as well, actually. So, David Greenwatt, Walt, maybe? I might have just written it down wrong. Ended up writing a lot of Angel, the TV show. He's one of the co-creators, I think, of it. And the director, Scott Brazil, died in 2006.
Vampires.
No, I think it was like... Oh, it was Lou Gehrig's disease, actually, specifically.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. I was going to write that down, and I was like, I'll never remember that, or I'll never be able to pronounce that when I get to it. But there you go.
And when did the episode come out?
So the episode came out on April the 14th, 1997. But the guy who directed it, he apparently took The Shield to greatness, which is that cop TV show from the noughties that I'd never watched but heard is great. So
people are very fond of The Shield, and I always think it's a superhero show because it's the cape. That's what I'm thinking of, and the Shield is very, 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 very close to that.
Yeah.
But this is a very exciting episode because this is this is the episode that underpins Angel's mythology for the next 20 years. This is the Angel episode as indicated by the title. And
more importantly, it's just a fucking good episode. It's really good.
It's a good episode. A lot of people have said, and even people who worked on the show, that this was the episode that told them that this wasn't just some hokey Monster of the Week show. This was something that was like real drama that was going to go for a long time, you know?
Yeah, no, I read that too. I remember watching it originally when I was younger and thinking, God, this episode's kind of a bit dramatic, a bit less fun than the rest of them, so it's not as good, so I didn't like it as much. But then I read the internet and I found out that everyone likes it, so I like it now too.
It's critically acclaimed.
It is indeed. I would probably say it's probably the only episode of season 1 that could get on any kind of top 10 lists or top 20 probably lists of best Buffy episodes. And I would probably put it in my top 20. Probably not my top 10 these days, but definitely in my top 20 at least, I'd say.
It's pure. It's a pure episode in terms of it's not heavy with history or chronology or themes. It's a very straightforward...
Oh.
Like, compared to later episodes, because when you get to season 6, you're layering things. There's history in there. But this is very... Like, the premise is very pure, I think, of what the reveal is.
My voice is actually in bits. I can't believe it. And I don't know why. I think I haven't spoken at all today, so that's probably why. One of the side effects of working from home. Yeah, no, it's quite straightforward. Like, they don't have to bear in mind a decade worth of canon in this episode. They can kind of just move straight ahead and establish everything at this point.
So speaking of establishing things, before we move into our very strong opinions about many scenes in this episode, Brian, can you tell us what happened in this episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh, fuck. At the end of the episode, I was like, I'm going to be great at that this episode. I know exactly what's happened. And then in the 20 minutes since then, it's all like flooded out of my head and I have no fucking idea what happened. Ugh. Okay. So they're in the Bronze, I think, to open. Is that right? Oh, thank you. Okay, that's right. They're Cock-a-rooshes. And they have to squish them for free drinks, which is cruel, but also I don't think very effective because cockroaches can survive anything. And then Buffy leaves because she's moping about Angel, and Angel's stalking her, and he's watching her from across the crowd, like literally. So that's cool. So she leaves, and then she gets attacked by the 3 who were sent by the Master, who's a vampire, and Angel helps her fight them off. And it's very, very rapey in the alley when they're attacking her. And then they go to Buffy's house because they're still chasing them. And Buffy invites Angel in, and Angel goes into the kitchen, and he gets shirtless, which is good. And then Joyce comes home and meets Angel, and that's a very beautiful interaction. And then Angel sleeps over, but he doesn't try anything because he's a gentleman. Then Buffy goes to school. Then Angel reads her diary. And then when she comes home that night, Darla has bitten Joyce, but it looks like Angel did it because Darla's a genius and knew exactly when Buffy would be home or something. And then Buffy decides that she has to kill Angel. Maybe, kind of. She throws him out a window first. And then they go to the Bronze, and it's not really explained, or maybe it is, but I missed it. But anyway, they go to the Bronze. And Angel's there, and he's trying to get Buffy to kill him. And then they have an emotional moment where she tries to get him to bite her, which Oh. And then Darla comes along and she has guns and Angel kills Darla. And then one of the best scenes in Buffy history happens in which Buffy and Angel are dancing the bronze afterwards. And Buffy is wearing a cross and she leans into Angel and she leaves the mark of a cross on his chest, which is just iconic. That's such a perfect, beautiful scene. It's great.
I can tell this is a very powerful episode for you, and I know this because what you always remember about episodes are themes and emotions, and because of that you've actually remembered quite a lot about this episode.
Yeah, a good bit.
Except for several things which you remembered exactly opposite as how they happened because they weren't relevant details, essentially.
Like what do I remember?
So you said that Angel read her diary. He specifically didn't read her diary. That was the point of that scene.
Yeah, you're right.
That she thought he had. But he was, a cool guy, TM.
Yeah.
And instead hidden in the closet. Anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But it's a great episode because, as I was discussing prior to the recording, I think this is the perfect mix of bad Buffy and good Buffy. Because there's plenty in there in terms of weird vampire stuff. And as you mentioned, Darla in a Catholic schoolgirl's outfit with 2 Colt 45 handguns a la Tomb Raider. And then you also have all this great emotional stuff that's happening as well. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
But we start off in the bronze, which again is adding another category of kind of establishment to what it does, because we've been very unclear about whether it is a hangout spot, is it a daytime cafe, is it a gig place, is it a club? Yep. People are having muffins and scones there. It's a whole thing. But
you get a free drink, which is not really cachet when you're drinking non-alcoholic beverages. So you'd have to presume that they're not squashing cock-a-rooshes for like a Sprite, or maybe they are.
Well, see, they do say for a free drink, which I think would imply to almost anyone it's an alcoholic drink, but it can't possibly be.
No, it can't, because they can't let 16-year-olds in then.
So specifically a pre-fumigation party. So the kick there is kill the cockroaches before we manage to kill them. It's very unclear. Also, I realize there's something, I think this is a misconception a lot of people have about cockroaches being indestructible. I think generally what people mean when they say that is cockroaches as a species rather than individual cockroaches being indestructible.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think someone pointed this out to me recently is that cockroaches will always, as a genus, survive.
Yeah.
But not one individual mighty cockroach will rule the earth.
Yeah, I never really distinguished between the two myself, but I definitely think in some way in my brain I thought that, individual cockroaches are very survivable for whatever reason.
But in terms of, so there's some weird things about this episode. Firstly, and this isn't indicated on the DVDs we watched, but it's actually the first episode of Buffy that has the recap where they say she was the Slayer, there's one Slayer in each generation, etc. Like, they're on all the episodes on the DVD, but on broadcast, this was the first one that had that.
Oh, was it?
And it's also the only episode I think so far we've seen that had a recap. Like, it was very specifically here are the 4
previously on
plot relevant things, the previously on things. Yeah.
In fairness, it wasn't relevant in any of your episodes except for potentially Never Kill a Boy on the First Date, which there was some like big bad relevant stuff, but not that much even then,
And the first thing I was thinking when I saw the Master interaction with Colin, who's the anointed child, and I noticed as well his name's Colin with 2 L's.
Oh, is it?
Very strange. But is that relationship a little weird? Because they're both demons or whatever, but this interaction they had was very much like this much older man, literally, textually grooming this child to take over for him. And he is, despite being a vampire, the child is still like 11 or whatever.
Yeah.
It can't, this time watching it, like, that comes off a little icky to me in a way that I'm not quite sure.
You can't write it. You certainly can't write that in the wake of Let the Right One In, I'd say. Like, given how like textual the pedophilic elements are in that book. Yeah, I actually had never thought about that. I never really thought about that. One of the thing I noticed about Colin is they did a really good job with his voice, because it is a doubled voice in some way. It has like, it's that thing they do sometimes where it's like a voice and they've manipulated it.
Exalted in post-production to sound weird, basically.
But it's only just a tiny bit weird. It's always like, oh, did I hear that right? And, you kind of feel like, oh, maybe I didn't hear that right. Maybe that's like his actual voice. But no, he's definitely sounding a bit weird. I always thought that was a bit good, actually.
I always thought the weird thing about the Anointed, when you look back, is it's never quite clear what he's meant to do to a certain degree. I think as an icon, and particularly later in the seasons when you have the child leading Buffy into hell, it's great. But like, it's one of these things we hand wave because it's like, what is actually his point here a little bit?
So it's a bit of a contradiction. So earlier in the first or second episode, or sorry, the fifth episode probably, it was the Anointed as a great warrior is the thing that, it was
misdirection.
Said. Yeah, and that's a misdirection. And you kind of feel like, oh, maybe he's going to do a bit of a Yoda where he turns out to be incredibly strong. But towards the end of the season, no, the implication is that like his whole destiny is to lead Buffy in. To some degree, which is, you know, I don't know, bit of an odd one. But then again, he does survive in the second season, and there is a implication that like maybe he is destined to do more. So
and he's ceremoniously dealt with.
He really is. Okay, here's a question for you. The Master speaks a lot about family in this episode. So are we looking at vampires as being the? I have two conflicting thoughts. One is that it is, in one way, a very traditional form of family in the sense that it's like blood relations and has all of the difficulties therein. And there's also the inherent disturbing incest implications.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's very much a chosen family. Whereas I really took the way that they're describing the familial relations in this episode as being in opposition to Buffy's traditionally seen very chosen family kind of approach, like Buffy as a character specifically, because Buffy's character very much does have a chosen family in the same way that queer people would do. Whereas, what's the tension there? What's your answers, Joel?
I think that the dynamic there, and one of the things that makes Buffy great in terms of a text you can look at from an LGBT, from a queering perspective, is that I think that mantle passes back and forth depending on what you're looking at, because there's a lot in horror and genre fiction of queer people if you're looking to spot or what's the word I'm looking for things that are coded as queer or things that are subtext as queer, having to pick out from otherwise potentially unsavory elements. And one of them often would be, as we mentioned before, there's the evil bisexual trope of people who are, you know, voracious in their appetites for both, you know, food, sex and blood. And is often the villains, as we've said, who are you know, coded as queer. So you have in this vampire, they're outside of normal society, they're underground, they're only coming out at night. It's a chosen family. Very specifically, if you were to stretch the metaphor, you have almost like elder gays or drag mothers or that kind of thing, because you have older vampires who create and induct the youngers who eventually destroy them, which is like that queers eat their parents very often as well.
If you're being also a little bit more meta, you can also look at that kind of search for endless youth or eternal youth as being quite traditionally homoerotic and, like, you know, queer culture inclined.
Yeah, absolutely. And the taking of, like, a lot of what they present about the demon in terms of the vampire being a demon is taking the things from the light of day, from the surface heteronormative society, so to speak, and twisting them, and that's often presented quite critically as a bad thing. But if you look at, say, with Darla, right? So Angel has this fixation with a high school girl. So she also is dressed as a high school girl, which in this episode specifically more of a Catholic school girl. So it's like taking it up to 11 a little bit. And a lot of what the vampires do in terms of, they will often have one trait or one thing that they've really fixated on. And we'll see in terms of queerness, Spike later on is going to be a great examination of that as well, with the whole 80s and the Billy Idol thing and all that. But you can definitely read a lot of what the vampires do as being the queering of the day society.
That's really interesting. And I mean, like, you know, not to be too on the nose, but like the issue of like transference via blood and exchanging of blood, like this is a 90s TV show. You can't write that and not think AIDS. And
actually something that jumped out at me in this episode, because I'm really trying to look at how they characterize the mythology of the vampire as we go on. So obviously, big reveal, spoilers, this will be the time to turn off if you haven't seen this far in Buffy. Angel is a vampire.
I wish this is, when I watched season 1, it wasn't the first episode of Buffy I'd ever watched. I wish I could go back and watch this episode for the first time, not knowing that Angel was a vampire. I feel like that would be such a treat, you know?
I think I might have mentioned this before on the podcast, but I did at one point in the modern day have someone who was watching Buffy in real time for the first time and having that time traveling experience of seeing them discover that Angel was a vampire.
Who was it again?
I'm not going to say.
I'll believe it out. Oh, there was also someone in Cusack who did it as well, I think.
Possibly. Many people haven't seen Buffy.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no, sure.
So in terms of the mythology of the vampire, when Buffy asks, is it possible for a vampire to be a good person? Giles, whose only exposure to this so far is the Watchers Council, which is very much a bastion of patriarchy here. He says absolutely not. It's literally not possible. There's no halfway house. There is nothing left of the person. It has its mannerisms, but it's only the demon.
Yeah.
And as the show goes on, it massively problematizes and often contradicts itself in terms of how much of the soul, but the person and the actual human animus or existence is still there. But I think that actually is not a contradiction in terms of what he says here. I think that's perfect in terms of this metaphor.
That's what he's been taught.
Yeah, he's been taught that, and he looks at these vampires, potentially queer creatures who are, you know, as he said, passing this on through blood transference and all this kind of stuff, and saying, no, I have a really unexamined position on this. They're monsters, and it's literally physically impossible for them to be otherwise. And we very quickly in this episode find out that he is wrong.
I can't wait to talk about in season 6 or so Spike's progression into being a genuinely good person pre-soul, which is such an odd area, so interstitial. So that's going to be really interesting to talk about. So here's actually one of my major questions for us going into this episode, because so big long story. I have read like a good bit of Buffy studies in the past. I once stole a book from the library by accident about Buffy studies that Joel persuaded the librarian not to kill me over, which was really good of him. So I've read a good bit of Buffy studies, but last Saturday after recording the episode, I just fell down a bit of a hole in terms of Buffy studies and started reading more and more about it, which became quickly very depressing because it's impossible to include all of Buffy studies or all of one form of Buffy thought in a podcast, because that'd be fucking boring as shit. But also, there's lots of Buffy studies that's...
A format's called an audiobook.
It is an audiobook. There's also lots of Buffy studies that are so, like, oddly using Buffy to understand something else. So, like, Buffy studies often is like, you know, oh, here's... this is how you could understand Plato through Buffy examples, and that shit's boring.
Using Buffy as a cipher for something else.
Exactly. So, and then of the texts that actually engage with Buffy as a text and as a studyable text, so few of them see it as being anything but Joss Whedon as a genius, and here's everything he wanted from the very beginning of the show. There's so much of it that's like that doesn't acknowledge that, like, Joss Whedon, like, at the beginning of the show, probably wasn't putting as much thought into this as he'd like to let you to think by the end. It's an immaculately structured show. It's probably the best structured show of all time, I would say, in terms of themes and character development. But I don't think you can quite read back as much as people have into everything.
I think it's inspired, but I don't think it's meticulously plotted.
Yeah. I mean, like, I remember listening to an episode of Gilmore Guys, actually, and they were talking about, they're talking to... Catherine Sutherland, I want to say. No, that's Joyce's actress. They're talking to the actor, the writer who wrote on Gilmore Guys. She wrote on
Jane Espenson.
Jane Espenson, thank you so much. So they had her on, and they're talking about the Buffy writing process. And apparently, Joss Whedon was saying, like they started off with like a big whiteboard for an episode, and they would say, here are all the points you want to hit, fill it in where you want. But like he would like change everything about what you wrote. He had such a hand in everything, and he was meticulous in how he did do that. But she was writing season 3, so it might have been bit of a different story than it is here. Read a lot of Buffy studies. It was depressing, honestly, ultimately. But I will be doing more of that in the future because I've found a couple of good resources. Yeah,
it's a really fertile space, and like if I haven't mentioned it by now, I'm sure I will repeatedly and annoyingly. But when I did my undergrad in English, it was very much on queer theory and science fiction and genre fiction and all that.
Yeah.
And it's really uneven in terms of what there is good text out there for. Buffy is actually a gold standard for genre fiction in terms of critical texts. There's a little bit about Star Trek, not that much actually, and it's because Star Trek's actually not that maybe complex a text in some ways. Quite some interesting things to say about Doctor Who. And then seeing it, lesbian studies, and seeing it, oh my god, like books and books and books.
Yeah.
But no, Buffy is the gold standard for that. And
I read one article I read during the week was that there have been in 2012 there have been 200 academic papers about Buffy, and something like 105 about Sopranos, and a little bit less about The Simpsons. Mm-hmm. So it's literally the most written about the most written about TV show of all time in academia.
There's definitely modules on it in some university courses. I think
there are modules on it, but there have been modules on The Wire and Sopranos, so that's actually not as... it's not as...
And on Who's the Boss?
Who's the Boss? Yeah, good joke. That's a good reference.
That's an episode about community.
It is, yeah.
So I want to say something funny.
Okay.
Like Xander said.
Yeah.
Which is surprising. Because, for one thing, Willow was watching him dance on the bronze dance floor lovingly. And he was dancing like the Bluths in Arrested Development, trying to do a chicken dance.
Sure was.
It was very frantic. But Cordelia insults him. I can't remember exactly what she says. And he turns around with uncharacteristic speed and says, I don't know what everyone was talking about, Corey. That outfit doesn't make you look like a hooker. And it was actually such a clapback. I was very surprised.
It was a clapback. I haven't noted that in my notes as, oh, Xander. Because it's funny and quick, but it was kind of mean.
Oh, it's mean. But, like, in fairness, Corey has said equally as sexist and terrible things to various people. Like, she has been rancid.
So, yes, totally agree. And one of the lines that Buffy has in that scene is, "Hi, honey, you're in grave danger. I'll see you next month," in reference to Angel. I think that was my choice quote for the episode. Because, what a perfect relationship.
Looking back now, looking at the first, 6 episodes, there's so many obvious hints that he's a vampire.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, all the stuff about him, like we said, about him biting his lip, looking at her, and talking about things sucking, him being like, oh, we don't like that word, or whatever. But one of the last things she says is, she's looking wistfully into the distance in the bronze, and Willow's like, oh, is it a guy? And she's like, not exactly a guy. It's like, yeah, he's not exactly a guy. Like, that's 100% hanging on lampshade.
There are a couple of lines like that in this episode. So a couple of the other ones I found were the part where he says he doesn't snore, and I was like, oh, is that because vampires don't sleep? And Joe very appropriately pointed out it's because they don't breathe, of course. Yeah,
because I was at pains to specifically remember a time a vampire sleeps, but I know for a fact that Spike definitely falls asleep while people are talking all the time, or when he actually. I forgot about this, but when him and Giles have that weird opposite, not opposites attract. What's the word I'm looking for? The odd couple thing where they're roommates. Giles definitely comes in with a broomstick at one point and whacks them to wake up. So, like, they do sleep.
Yeah. The other things that they say, there's something right after when they get into Buffy's bedroom that I will find now that was also quite funny. Oh yeah, Buffy says, "I don't want you to get dead." I'm just like, too late.
To get dead, yeah.
Yeah, he is already dead. It was. They really laid it on thick in this episode before they reveal what happened to Angel, that he is a fucking vampire.
Because it's great. Because it's a great, really classic theme, and it's something that obviously, Twilight had tried to mine. But I can't really think of a lot of, like, mortal falls in love with the vampire specifically thing before this. Yeah.
Dracula probably. There is a good bit of sexual tension between him and one of the characters whose name I can't remember.
True. There may be sacrilege, and I apologize to Dracula fans. But
sorry, Ronan, if you're listening.
Yeah, I was going to say Ronan. Mina, I think.
Yeah, I think it might be Mina.
But what's interesting about that is because there's a couple of ways that's portrayed.
She's under his thrall, isn't she?
It's often under the thrall. It's often a very ogre, predatory, the master like vampire. The other side of that, I was trying to think, is there any example of there being kind of a hunter relationship there?
Okay.
But obviously there's not, because there's very few female vampire hunters before the Slayers. So you would have maybe, someone in Dracula's castle, but it would be these really sexualized brides of Dracula. And this is a complete inversion of that. So I think that's actually why you can't have this plot in some ways to this degree before Buffy, because you need a character who is both as vulnerable and as feminine as Buffy, and also as strong and as dangerous as her, and that is what Buffy is. And something else that I think we have all this great emotional stuff later in the episode. So you have all this crap that I love, trash.
Yeah.
Well, capital T, trash, that I love. Something that Buffy stopped doing was these themed vampires, and I love this, like the three.
Yeah, the three.
These vampire assassins, and basically they're vampires walking down this set on the WB studio.
Is it WB? I can't remember ever. CW?
Okay, well,
I can't remember.
Very clear studio streets that they're walking down. And they're in medieval armor. They look like old-timey Klingons from the original series of Star Trek. They might have a mace. One guy is missing an eye, has a scar. And, like, we're meant to imply from this, or not imply, sorry, we're meant to infer from this a certain amount of backstory. It's like, oh, these must be these really old assassins. They never really tell us anything about them. No. They don't do much. And they get killed by Darla for failing very quickly. So it's like, is this literally the first time you've ever failed doing an assassin contract?
Literally, yes. It's the WB, by the way. But yeah, no, they were odd. They were an odd one. I'm sure there's something to be written about like armor in Buffy, because I mean this kind of medieval attack or approach they're taking now, I think it's replicated at some point. Don't they have some kind of crusader vampire hunter at some point? Crusader kind of like protector with Buffy? I feel like that's a trope that comes up. I'm not just thinking of Evil Dead, am I?
No, there are a couple. No, I know exactly what you're talking about with the Evil Dead, but there is often a thing, the Knights of X.
Yeah, is there
Knights of Sidonia.
Is there Knights of in Buffy?
Well, just I think there's a couple. One that comes to mind is in season. Actually, no, it might not be season 7. It might be in season 3 when the first arrives for the first time.
The first arrives for the first time to Angel when he's gone, just after he's come back. So yeah, I think it must be season 3.
So when the Bringers, who are the first agents with the missing eyes, arrive, there's Knights around that time, and they're tasked to defeat the first. But that falls to the wayside by the time season 7 comes around.
I feel like in season 7 there's not a couple of references to them having been slain, or their order having been slain in the coming up to this. Yeah, I definitely think there's something to be said about Crusader armor and Crusader themes in Bad Guys and Buffy.
But something Buffy does in this episode as well, which I think is a really cute season 1 thing in a lot of shows, is presenting something which for later Buffy will be quite like day to day as like a really big thing, which is her getting a crossbow and using a crossbow as she's now graduating as a Slayer to weapons training. And this is the thing that happens in other genre shows as well. You have someone like fighting a single ship in the end of season 1 of some sci-fi show, and then by the end of season 7 they're wiping out an entire fleet of them.
Many ninjas.
The many ninjas thing. So yeah, basically if anyone isn't familiar, the many ninjas theory or problem is that if you have your good samurai facing off against a single evil ninja, that's a pitched battle between two equal foes, and then later in the movie he might be fighting 100 of the same ninjas who cumulatively have the same ability as the one guy he fought. So it's or the stormtrooper problem. The more enemies there are, the less powerful the individual ones are.
Yeah.
And actually the
example,
and I use intentionally there, is the Uber Vamps, or the Turok-Han. In season 7 of Buffy, a single Uber Vamp is almost impossible for Buffy to kill.
Yeah.
And Joss Whedon has acknowledged that it was a narrative shortcut in the finale where they're killing hundreds of them.
Yeah,
and
they're all killing hundreds of them, not just Buffy.
Yeah, the potentials, and I think probably some of the Scoobies as well. Yeah. And he has said, look, we just had to get where we were going with the story, which is totally fine.
The other example from my mind will always be Alien. In Alien 1, it's one alien will wipe out a whole ship full of very competent people, whereas in Alien 2 it's like, oh, point your machine gun at them and they'll be fine.
That's a good point, and I think there's probably a whole different podcast we said about the
Alien
different
allies.
Alien advocates.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Okay, I was actually thinking, should our fans, all of you, all the many of you, all
hi ma'am,
hi Sabrina, should they be called Buffy Boyos?
Maybe
Boy Boyos?
Buffy Bookles?
Buffy Bookles? No.
That's the Irish word for boy.
It is.
For all our international fans.
Buffy Boys?
Buffy Boys. B-O-I.
Okay, yeah.
That could work. But what I was going to say about Alien before I lose that thread is that I think part of the point of Aliens was that they were military people as opposed to it just being a couple of miners on the first ship. And I think that's kind of fair enough. I think Alien and Aliens are both very good films in their genre. But anyway, getting off track. When Angel fights the three to save Buffy, again a situation where she looks like she's being sexually assaulted in a dark alley, and he comes and saves her, and the whole White Knight thing there. He pulls the guy's hair. He grabs a handful of this guy's ponytail and reefs his head back.
That's funny.
And it's very unchivalrous.
Yeah. Okay, here. So, talking about vampires, we're 7 episodes into this podcast. Joel, what do vampires mean? What are vampires? What do they represent? I have a lot of ideas here.
Like in the world?
No, not
or
in the world,
show.
For Buffy in Buffy's show. So, okay, so a lot of the reading I've been doing this week would suggest that all monsters in the Buffy verse are an expression of various issues that Buffy has. So that's fine. The vampire in that way comes to represent the issue of like sexual assault kind of thing, and wandering libido and aggression. Whereas say in an episode where Buffy is, I'm gonna make something up, is worried about school, something will come along to interrupt her studies, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, is the metaphor of the vampire, does it become too complex with the weight of the show to really pin it down, or is there something that we can look to it and say that's what that is?
I think what happens with Buffy and eventually Angel as it goes on is, at the moment, vampires for the most part, with the exception of Angel, so I'm including the Masters in vampires, are a single unit.
Yeah.
Vampires are a single entity. And what problematizes it and makes it more complex as it goes on is vampires become, there's more individual vampires that we have relationships
Sure.
with. But the concept with vampires as a race never goes away. And I think it is, you know, there's a lot of different ways to cut it. I think it's, as a very simple metaphor, it's the teenager having this other life which seems to be and is of internal importance, that is invisible from the outside. It's all the danger and hostility and unknownness, if that's the word, of the world beyond high school and beyond kind of the very quotidian and the very, you know, traditional Sunnydale environment. It's the fear of everything that I think many women would be afraid of, walking in the dark. You know, the vampire is the other. And actually, very specifically, and I actually thought this was a great line at the time, when Angel vamps out in Buffy's room and then he like water slides out her window.
Yeah, I picked this up too. Go on.
Joyce comes in when Buffy screams, and Joyce says, "What happens?" And Buffy says, "Nothing. I just saw a shadow."
Yeah.
And that is what that's why vampires are scarier than the big worm or the spider monster, is because specifically the vampire is the dark other, and the dark other, I think, is perhaps the single most fundamental fear in human literature, is the person who looks like you, who is outside the fireplace, outside the cave, looking in. The person from that cave across the way,
Sure,
who is almost you but not, and can infiltrate. That's the fear. It's the invasion.
Yeah, where every similarity that being has is an aggression towards your existence, because they, while being similar in almost every way, they do have that slight difference, which is very Us. Is that what that movie is called? Coming out soon by the guy who directed Get Out. I was going to say Jordan Peterson. That's not what his name is.
I keep doing that. I keep thinking.
What's his name? Jordan
Patterson?
No, it's not that either.
We should know this.
We should know this. He's a great director. That Get Out was great. People don't really engage with the fact that Get Out was a comedy. But anyway, Us looks incredible. I can't wait to see it. But that's it's very specifically about the other and the slight change in between you and the thing that's terrifying you.
Or the other mother in Coraline.
Yeah.
There's a reason why that's so creepy.
It is. It's the uncanny valley, really. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that, Joel.
Just before we move on, can I explain what the uncanny valley is?
Yeah, sure.
Because some people might not be familiar with that.
I mean, I was also thinking this. Do people know what the other is? I mean, obviously it's Said, who is a post-colonial theoretician who would suggest the idea of the other, which is it's more a geographical concept of this person who, person of another race who looks like you but isn't you, and you need to differentiate to maintain your identity. You need to differentiate between yourself and them, and by doing so, you other them, and you make them the other. But sorry. So
it's fundamental. It's you define yourself by saying, "Well, I might not be able to articulate what I am, but I know I'm not that." And by doing so, you bit by bit define the borders of your own identity, which I think plays into Buffy quite a lot.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we other women on a constant basis. We're language. It's a woman or she, and all these things. It's addendums.
Or having feminine versions of jobs, like actress rather than actor.
Manpower, all these things. It's the way in which we
set men as the default. Exactly,
set men as the default, and have women be the defined other in the way that they're different to men. But go on. Sorry. You were saying about
the uncanny valley. Yeah. So basically, the uncanny valley is, and I might not explain this in technical terms, but if you're looking at, say, a robot or a doll that's been made to look like a person, and it's an almost perfect replica of a person, or a wax figure, or anything that's meant to resemble a person, but there's something infinitesimal that is different, something that you might not be able to put your finger on, but something which your instincts which have been honed genetically over millions of years, the animal part of your brain can see that it's not quite right. If we were still more animalistic as a species, it wouldn't smell right. And that's the uncanny valley, that tiny gap between what is us and how you know it's not a real you, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why when we see things like, even when it's done very well, if anyone's seen the recent Star Wars films, when you see either Princess Leia or Grand Moff Tarkin, the CGI versions of them, that might be immaculately done, but we can tell it's just not a real person, and that creeps us out. And that's kind of where it comes from. That's the uncanny valley.
And importantly, it's a Freudian concept. So with that, how do you read Angel in the sense of, like, Angel is very easy to read if you read him as being a kind of reformed man, you know, a man who at one point was a raping, pillaging, literally
monster, specifically.
Absolutely monster. Yeah. And, like, you know, in some ways being the worst version of a man in the sense that he was charming and persuasive and would take your trust and use that to great effect to destroy you. So with that, how do we read Angel if we're also saying that the because, like, you know, obviously now he's woke, you know, he's realized the damage that he's done and that vampires can do. So what does that imply if, you know, vampires are the other, the othered being the dark reflection of ourselves?
So I think by having Angel have a soul, or a term which only comes up in Buffy, which is he's insouled. What I think it does is it creates this liminal space, this interstitial space between the two concepts, where in some ways it almost absolves the vampire of responsibility, the traditional vampire, because it does very specifically say that what makes Angel different is he has a soul, and what they equate the soul with is a conscience, and it's a recognition of empathy, and that what vampires as a dark other are is complete inhibition and complete detachment from the social order. Like, for example, like one of the things the Master says in this episode is it's a very weighty or serious decision to take a life. Not humans, obviously, that's not what I mean, but vampires. Yeah. So the vampires other us at the same time.
Sure.
They see us as the lesser.
Yeah, Darla a couple of times in this episode says that you've aligned with them.
Yeah, and it's a classic thing where the vampires are small in number, individually powerful. So you can either see them as a minority situation in some ways because they're obviously, they have to hide and they're outnumbered by people, etc., or as potentially a ruling class, and a situation where the majority is actually the underclass, you know,
the vocal minority.
The vocal minority, exactly. And you see that in I think it might be season 3 when we have that alternate universe where the Master has succeeded. There's still few vampires, but they can subdue humans. Yeah. So I think what Angel introduces there is this concept that is what separates us from them, as it were. That's what's othering the vampire, is this lack of humanity. And humanity and what that means and what the distinction is between taking a human life versus killing a human-like monster is a grey area, which I think, to his credit, Buffy never really gives a firm answer on. Everyone has an opinion, everyone has their own philosophy, but unlike other texts, it doesn't say, but this one is the correct one.
I was about to say, what's really interesting here is the scene where Angel and Buffy kiss, and Angel very quickly vamps out, which is consistent with season 2 when Angel loses his soul again. He, as a direct response to having sexual relations with Buffy for the first time. Sorry to set the table. But so the implication there is that, like, you know, that there's something about this male sexuality and male heterosexual sexuality that once ensouled is potentially is still exists within Angel. You know, when he's a vampire, he loses all of his conscience even. But he, when he has a soul, he still has the ability to be evil. He still has the ability to be potentially, like, he is tempted to drink from Joyce when Darla bites her midway through the episode. So that's really fascinating. I mean, like, you know, it's not a black and white situation. It's a black and grey. It's, you know, you're a vampire, and even then, like, you know, with Spike and later seasons, like, you know, vampires do become much more complex. You know, as it's presenting at the moment, it's you're evil or you're a person. Yeah. You know, with the ability to swing either way.
Well, 100%. I think what this really brings up for me in terms of Buffy and why it's a better text to examine these things through, I'm actually going to draw, I don't do this very often, I'm going to draw a little bit on my Jesuit education.
Sure.
And talk about what I actually think is a very interesting part of the Bible in terms of, don't worry, I won't be talking about the Bible very often with any promotion, you know?
Okay, with promotion, fair.
But the concept of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and basically the most important thing Jesus did in terms of the crucifixion was that he had a choice to leave, but he chose to stay. And that's the fundamental moment of that theology, of that moral code, is that it's one thing to say it was fated. And it's also why I have a lot of issue with Judas supposedly being a villain, because he had to do what he had to do, or else it wouldn't work. Anyway. But,
so by which we can understand that Joel has listened and watched Jesus Christ Superstar hundreds of times.
I have strong feelings with Jesus Christ Superstar.
But okay, go on.
How that applies here is the important thing about Angel isn't that he can't do these things now, because you have a vampire who can't hurt people, and that's Spike.
Yeah.
And that's played for laughs in many ways. Angel has all the same potential that Angelus has. He chooses not to, and he actively and continually chooses not to. Not just because it's abhorrent, because many times he feels an instinct where he wants to do it, or he could do it, and he chooses not to, and that's what makes him human, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with you. One of the things I read this week, actually, which is quite interesting, is that I read a suggestion that the pack is a bit of a shadow episode for this, or a precursor episode, because it gets the conversation started about kind of transference and reverse transpossession, all those things. So it's the idea of, like, you know, kind of like being vamped and having your soul back and all these things. So that was so I read that, like, something I read suggested that it was meant to be a reflection of the themes in this episode.
That's cool,
which is interesting. You know, I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, I'm with that. I mean, I don't totally agree, but I'm with that. I don't think the pack was written for anything except to be a bit of fluff, realistically.
No, there was something else I was reading recently where someone was saying, oh, it's really cool that, you know, all these fans reading all these ideas into why I did this, because I didn't know why I did it, and I think that's perfectly legitimate. I think it's a lot of great writing that's like that, you know.
I think, I mean, like, there's definitely something to be said about, you know, authorial intent isn't everything when it comes to a text. I mean, you can't only rely on what the author intended when reading a text, because, you know, Freudian reading requires all of that. But yeah, it's an odd one. So, did you notice his tattoo?
I did. I always found it very hard to understand what his tattoo is. It's like an A with a wing or a bird or something.
So I read about this. Yeah, no, it's kind of. It's clearly Book of Kells or something Book of Kells adjacent. Yes,
and actually, just to establish, this is the episode that makes it very clear that Angel is Irish.
Oh yeah.
So let's take that and bank it potentially.
I'm cool with it. You know, I mean, except for the Irish accent he does.
Except for when he does his accent.
Yeah,
but anyway, we'll get to that.
But it's a griffin.
Oh, very cool.
So griffin obviously being a
half bird, half lion.
Yep. So a half breed.
Oh,
very appropriate for Angel, obviously. But I mean, I'm not sure how much that, like, really incorporates into his character overall.
I guarantee that throughout the Angel and all the different episodes he's in, they often forget that he has the tattoo.
I bet you anything. I seriously doubt they include that tattoo through Angel, the TV show. I'd be very surprised, to be honest.
Yeah, and like that whole sequence where he's in Buffy's house and meeting Joyce is just really funny and weird. Yeah. Like, at one point she introduces Angel as a first year community college history student, which is so weirdly specific.
It was oddly
specific. He could easily have, like, ghosted out of there, but he made himself known.
Yeah.
And then while he was in her bedroom, hid in her closet while Joyce came in and cleaned the room.
We don't need to talk about that, do we?
Well, there's actually something very specific I do want to lift out of that, which is that she says to him, you know, get ready to stay here tonight. And she says, don't look at me, turn around, don't look at me while I'm changing.
We have the same notes, but that's so cute. So cute.
Yeah, and he doesn't, whereas Xander did. Yeah, and let's just put that out there. Yeah.
That was 100%, that's my notes about it as well, is that Xander, Xander and Angel are very specifically being put in contrast here. So much of my Buffy studies reading during this past week read Xander quite favourably. And so many people have a high, like, opinion of Xander. I think he's a scum human.
Well, in this episode, he does very specifically just focus a lot on, is she kissing Angel? Let's kill Angel. He's not a real person. It's like if we're reading vampires, and, you know, if we're going, you know, we're also reading the Slayer as, like, feminist and queer in so many different ways. So we'll have to pick and choose when we read vampires as also kind of queer coding.
Sure.
But it is kind of Xander just saying, he's strange, he's different, kill him, you know?
I mean, yeah, there's a literal point where they find out that Angel's a vampire, and he's like, well, better kill him. Which is just so odd in the sense that you've seen Angel, you've interacted with him. He's like, you might think you might want to bone Buffy, but you don't go advocating for killing a person without understanding the full situation. In that situation, I don't think.
And actually, while we're in Buffy's bedroom,
yeah,
can I tell you
the interaction between them?
But I think it's one of the best lines. Best line that I don't remember Sarah Michelle Gellar delivering.
Yeah,
it's incredible. And so basically, what it is she thinks he has read her diary when it turns out it was actually Joyce had quote unquote moved her diary.
I think he would have said if she'd read it.
True, yeah. But while she's trying to cover for herself, what she says is, and it's delivered like very comically, but she says, hunk can mean a lot of things, bad things, and when I said your eyes were penetrating, I meant bulgy, and A can stand for anything, like Ahmed, a charming foreign exchange student, and it was just, everything of it was just sheer panic.
It was beautiful. It is maybe my favorite interaction in this show so far. I watched a really cute video the other day with Alison Hannigan, actually, where she said that Sarah Michelle Gellar, was worked to the bone in this show. She apparently did 18-hour shoots every so often. She was just she was the workhorse of this show, and she was the backbone of it, as a worker. And I'm so unsurprised. I think Sarah Michelle Gellar is such a fucking champ.
Yeah, she's great. She's just been a real good sport.
She has, yeah.
Since as well.
Oh, she absolutely has. Yeah. Okay, so I've a couple of more small points. One, we can talk about this further on in the season, but what is our interpretation of the Master in relation to Buffy? So what does the Master represent? Is it insidious masculinity? Is it a tradition of of traditional vampires kind of thing? What is he?
I think the Master is?
What?
I think the Master is a teacher.
Oh.
And I think that, people overlook the Master when they look back on the show a little bit.
Yeah, they seem as very basic.
Yeah, but the Master is, for me, the energy there is that secondary school teacher or high school teacher that you hated.
Okay.
And this kind of authoritarian figure, the one who is kind of a bit of a smart arse and
makes sarcastic comments.
That maybe are a little bit funny, but it's not fair because you can't say anything back.
Yeah.
There's this whole power dynamic, and Buffy needs to move against and through a traditional vampire lore to deconstruct the rest of what she does later on. It's very much this season, and it's a short season, is about here is the entire vampire canon in some ways, the arc that and now it's done. Now he's staked it.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, that's very interesting what you're saying about her, him relating to her as a teacher, in the sense that Buffy's issues with education are a little bit mentioned in this episode in terms of history and her being bad at history. And Giles had that lovely line where it was actually so deep and lovely. It was when Joyce is asking Giles why Buffy's having difficulty with history. Giles says Buffy is very much very much in the now, and history is very much in the then. Which was, I thought was quite good.
Yeah.
It's actually quite appropriate response in terms of her relation to education throughout the show, in the sense that she's a character who, even with her difficulties in terms of being a vampire slayer, she has difficulty with education. She has difficulty staying focused and staying engaged. I think that's very interesting. I believe Joss Whedon had a similar relationship to education.
Yeah. I picked up on that with Jaws as well, and I think people are happy to slap father figure in almost any character these days.
Yeah,
Jaws' role there is earned. He really does take on a paternal role and a really invested role, and it's from day one.
It is. No, it's genuinely it's. I think it is the backbone relationship of this show, I'd say, which is why it's so sad when he leaves various points towards season 6 and 7. Joyce had a couple of absolute choice lines there towards the end, or when she's in the hospital.
So we're not certain whether or not the reason why she was so wacky in the hospital is because she was on a morphine drip or something.
Yeah, okay, so is she on drugs, or Joel, do you hear what Joel says right afterwards, is that it presents as anemia?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if anemia makes you like goofy, does it?
I'm not sure. I don't know much about anemia, but it's basically a lack of iron in the blood. So they give her iron for that. Iron deficiency, obviously.
There was a bit of a crunchy line there where Buffy says that the doctor said her blood count was low.
Yeah, blood count.
I don't think that's what they meant to say.
No, it is not.
White blood cell or iron count.
Yeah.
But it's just you're meant to have 10 blood. You only have 4.
So I kind of read that as indicating that Giles sees this as a specific symptom of being bitten by a vampire. Not the lack of blood, but potentially of some sort of poisonous or mystical kind of effect. And I thought that maybe kind of implied why she was acting that way. It's not something they pick up on too much. I think at various points people get bitten by vampires and are reasonably fine the next scene, except for a bandage on their neck.
Yeah, and it could have been that often in classical vampire mythology there is a sense of, as you said, of being enthralled or there being some kind of charm associated with it.
Yeah. Okay, so my last big question for the day. I forgot what it is, so let me find it.
So I'm going to talk about some random things we were talking about that, okay?
Okay.
Buffy's address is 1630 Rebello Drive. I don't think that comes up very often.
Yeah,
I wrote that down. The scene where Buffy comes home and finds Angel, it's completely implausible because Darla has set this up perfectly that it looks like he's drinking from Joyce.
Yeah.
But you cut to the next scene and Buffy has thrown him at full force through her sitting room window. It is powerful and I love it.
Only matched by when Angel slides on his belly down the slats outside of her bedroom window.
Yeah, he has a lot of ignominious exits. And there's a couple of things that I'm going to mention briefly now because I think we'll be revisiting them as we go on because they're more established in tropes. But vampires can't enter the house unless you invite them. Yep. This is a really solid thing. This is always represented later in Buffy and Angel as an actual like force field and like a mime in an invisible box. But this vampire, one of the three in this episode, actually gets his whole arm and shoulder into the house before they get pushed out again. So it's this real kind of like confusing. Soft disinvitation. You know?
Yeah, as opposed to it's shown as an actual like force field.
Yeah, and I actually don't specifically remember her inviting Angel in. Now maybe I missed that.
She did. It was very, very brief. She says, come on in, quick, or something like that, you know? Yeah. It's a very brief one. And
they do some interesting stuff with that later on about how like if a building has a sign that says enter all you who seek education and that's taken as an invitation, all that kind of stuff.
And they also suggest like public buildings, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, so two things. One, when Buffy offers her neck to Angel, what do you make of that? I kind of read it as being like reasonably straightforward. But it is kind of like ripe for discussion. Like it's her vulnerability, it's her willingness to expose herself sexually, probably. It's also, I think, potentially a challenge for him to say, like, you know, look, you're not a bad person.
Yeah, so this is basically a scene where he's really trying to provoke her to kill him, and he's very specifically acting like Angelus, like he's doing that thing, you know, that kind of like really sarcastic thing he does, throwing the voices, etc. Yeah. And what I would read that scene as, where he basically says, you know, I could kill you and all that kind of stuff, and she offers her neck and says, well, then do it. In another text, another Twilight-esque text, that would be a moment of submission or something vulnerable. And it's not that it's not vulnerable, but what she is saying there, in my opinion, is my vulnerability is not a weakness.
Oh.
It's very much, do what you're going to do, I'm not afraid of it. And that, you know, it's this frisson that Buffy Summers has between being both feminine and things that are associated usually with very combative and aggressive male things. It's like, it's always a blending of the two.
Yeah.
And here she says, I am literally doing what helpless female victims in traditional, you know, cliche text do, pulling back my tiny scarf and showing you my arteries.
Of course.
Do what you want. I'm the Slayer. Do you know what I mean? There's an element of that. You know, I don't feel in that moment she seems in any way powerless. Okay,
that's a great interpretation of it. I've bought in. Thank you. Okay, and quickly, because we are running out of time, that last scene. My God. It was so fucking good. Just the conversation between them was just so genuine. And that small exchange, okay, so the lines were Buffy asks Angel, are you okay? And he says, it's just, and she says, painful? I know. It's because he's winced, and it's just like when they kiss for the first time that he vamps out. She's kissing him now. He thinks he wants to eat me, or he wants to suck my blood. And what's actually happening, suck on my blood. But what's actually happening is that her cross is burning into his chest, which I think is a scar that he keeps for a while at least. Yeah,
I think so. I was saying to you while we were watching it that I think that imagery is so strong, and the themes are so strong that carries the Buffy and Angel relationship until now. Like that's because they actually don't have a tremendous amount of time to interact, and then they over the course of the show, and then they spend a lot of time talking about how they
used to be brilliant.
Close, etc. But
and I mean, even within the show, sometimes it feels towards the end of season 7, you're like, oh, why is that Buffy never moved on? And you're watching this, and you're thinking, of course she never moved on. This is like they're such genuine chemistry, and it's like it's genuine, traditionally written, beautiful star-crossed lovers. It's the same way that Jack and Rose up in the front of the Titanic doing the Titanic arms. like that's one of the brief times in which they have together before the whole thing goes south. I'm sure there's a joke there about going south and sinking. Anyway,
Sunk like the Titanic.
This is their oh, sorry, shouldn't be doing that. The days in summer where there's no rain in Greek myth.
Halcyon days?
This is their halcyon days. And it's already so like deep. Oh, yeah, but you're right. This like portrayal of this relationship, it carries the weight of what's to come in the show. I think if you showed that last scene in the bronze to someone trying to sell this show with, you know, witty banter from Willow and Xander aside, and that genuinely touching moment between them, and that beautiful like moment of her walking away with the cross still left on his chest, I think you've just sold a 7-season show to someone. I think they fully bought in at that point.
Absolutely, no, it is linchpin. 100%.
It is.
It's the log bearing scene, yeah.
And it's, I mean, like, it obviously represents, I mean, just like Angel is the Jesus of the show. He's the one who is born in sin but like can elevate and can make something of himself. He literally crucified at a couple of points in the show as well.
Yeah, and so is Spike specifically as well. But Spike's obviously trying to ape what Angel is a whole thing which we will have much more time to look at, because that Angel thing is going to go on. So there's just a couple of things that I can mention quickly before we kind of start to wrap up, because they are things we'll return back to. One is Buffy's Slayer training, which is like a side plot, which I'm very interested in because it's just cool. I love
it too.
There's like the weapons locker. There's the fact that Giles always dresses up like a dog handler when he has to deal with her, which I think is very cute. The fact that he thinks he can fight with a quarterstaff and he's just really bad at it. She beats the ever-loving shit out of him as well. Like when they're like fighting with the quarterstaff, she just batters him onto the ground, which is really enjoyable. It's introducing this idea as well with Joyce being bit, that they think she fell on a barbecue fork, and it's like, Joyce, you know that's not what happens. Like no one believes that's what's happening. So, but I do think that is an element of willful disbelief. Like that's not bad writing. That's like people are looking away from this. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, like that's it plays into the coming out as a Slayer scene in the end of season 2, where she says things like, you know, I found blood stains in your pants and stuff, but I just, you know, ignored it. She also screams when Darla bites her, so I'm not sure if you forget that.
Yeah, there's an absolute willful thing there. Something I never noticed before is Angel has yellow eyes.
Oh.
And this is like the first time he vamps out, and I think they do a pretty good job with him.
Yeah.
But Darla, Julie Benz, who plays Darla, was the test for the vampire makeup. She can't speak while she has the teeth thing.
No, S's are a big problem.
All. Yeah. And they make a big deal when we read about this episode that it took him 90 minutes to put the vamp face on.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Like Star Trek Aliens, it spent 5-6 hours, and we're talking about series regulars. Every episode, they're in the seat 4 o'clock in the morning to get ready for an episode. So it's not that impressive, honey. I'm sorry.
Mystique in X-Men 1, hours and hours. Apparently some in the region of 12 hours to get ready for that. But that's a full body thing. And one of the other notes that everyone wrote about it is that the Hugo Boss duster that Angel owns is worth over $1,000. And you know what? I don't even know what a fucking duster is, so I don't give a shit.
Oh, you would love a duster.
Would I?
No, but you would love the idea of them.
Are they like leather jackets?
Like really long to your feet, kind of leather jackets?
No, I couldn't wear one of those. No, Jesus Christ. Remember in like the around 2005, where the kids who grew up watching The Matrix got to the age of like 19 and could afford a leather jacket, and they all bought one of those, and they all looked fucking insane. Angel
pulls it off though. So does Spike. Except Spike always looks a little weedy in his.
You know who specifically pulls it off? Buffy. Buffy looks incredible in a long leather jacket.
She does. So very briefly, let's talk about Darla.
Oh yeah.
Because Darla doesn't return in Buffy. She does return in Angel for quite an extensive arc. But we'll talk about Darla again because she's quite important to Angel's development. But she's really bizarre here in the sense that she corners Buffy and Angel by herself, pulls out 2 guns and tries to Tomb Raider, and it's so completely incongruous.
Great reference. That is what she does, yeah.
It's what she 100%. She slides, the zooms, the slow motion.
There's a slide on a pool table?
It's completely incongruous with anything that's ever happened to Buffy before or since. And something that Buffy says in the scene to Angel as well is, "You're not an animal. Animals I like." So I was like, tick, Buffy likes animals.
Yeah. One of the notes I read about Darla was that Darla dies 4 times, and I was like, I can think of 2.
So she dies when she's vamped.
Yeah.
She dies here.
Okay, yeah. Does she die when she gives birth to Connor?
She
doesn't give birth to Connor, does she?
No. So this is what happens, okay?
Okay.
So she dies when she's vamped. She dies in this episode. She's brought back in Angel as a human.
End of season 1.
Then she's vamped again, and then she dies. She gives birth to Angel's son by staking herself and leaves the baby behind. So it is 4 deaths.
I forgot that scene. That's cool. That's really cool.
And that was in the alley outside of Angel's hotel, which is the same alley that they ended the show in.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. Angel's an interesting show.
Angel is an interesting show. It's deeply complicated.
It's a very different show, but it's an interesting show.
I've only watched it once, and that was the time that we watched together.
And just touch on very briefly a couple other things. Buffy says, I've killed a lot of vampires. I never hated one before, which I think is something we can probably talk about more as we go on. Darla says, come on. This is a very specific line. As Darla dies, she says, come on, Buffy, take it like a man.
Yeah.
So I just want to leave that with you, and we can have a think about what that means. But
is it just glibness between two women fighting?
I don't think you throw that in there without making some kind of comment.
Yeah. Dear listeners, please tweet at us maybe, or write us emails, really long emails, about how much anxiety you're going to induce in me by doing so. But tell us what you think about that line, please.
Yeah, you might not know anything, but we bet you reckon something.
Yep.
And the very last thing, very funny line from Willow, who's real MVP in this episode, really carrying the comic side of things.
Sure is.
Buffy says about Angel wistfully, in a way, I feel like he's still watching me. And Willow says, in a way, he sort of is. In the way that he's right over there.
Yeah.
I found that very funny.
Yeah, Willow was great. She didn't have, she's been so underutilized in this season. Alison Hannigan is a powerhouse. Okay. Ready for ratings? Or do you want to say anything about...
Absolutely.
Do you want to say anything about fashion? There's not that much to be said here.
No, Buffy wears a patterned blue leather jacket.
It's kind of glittery.
It's kind of glittery. There's a lot of signet rings. Xander's
wearing a signet ring. Why?
She's wearing a ring with an opal on it the size of an eyeball. She has really fluorescent turquoise nails.
She looked stunning in that last scene. That is the most beautiful I think Sarah Michelle Gellar ever looks. She has beautiful hair. She's lit perfectly, so softly, and she's wearing a kind of a stringy tank top kind of thing, and she just looks so delicate, which is something that I would usually not describe a woman as because it's quite condescending. But when it's Buffy, she balances delicacy and harshness and roughness so well that this is a moment of delicacy. It's very beautiful.
Absolutely. And my last fashion point is that Rupert Giles has a tendency to wear a lot of tiny scarves.
Does he?
Yeah, little fancy silk ones.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, he often wears a long scarf, he's Fraser Crane going to the hospital, etc.
Yeah,
but he also wears a little fascinating scarf kind of thing around his neck. Yeah, it's cute.
It's cute. Okay, I'll give this episode 8.4 unread diaries out of 10. Fair.
I'm actually going to say it gets a 9.4 from me.
Wow.
Yeah, I think this is one of the best episodes of Buffy.
Oh my god, should I? Oh, maybe I should re-rate it.
No. Stick with your convictions.
With the season that's in it,
9.4 crucifixes. Sorry, I'm going to be very traditional. Crucifixes.
No, I'm going to give it an 8.7, Joel.
That's fine.
Because it's a very good episode. I have no criticisms of it, to be honest.
I think this episode was the reason why Buffy went on for 7 seasons. To some extent.
Yeah, no, it has to be. It's a stunning episode.
And just briefly to speak about who died in this episode, the Buffy Wikipedia mentions Zachary, who is the
person mentioned in the opening, the
vamp that was dusted off screen.
Strong and careful.
Strong and careful, yeah. The 3, Darla, and helpfully it also mentions that one cockroach squashed by Willow.
One cock-a-roosh. All right, well done us. We're going to get Chinese again. It's going to be great.
We honestly can't mention Chinese every time because we have it every time we do this. So
I know, but I'm pretty sure my stomach has spoken for me. My stomach's been rumbling this whole episode.
Okay, and so I think that's us for this week. I just want to say again very quickly, thank you very much to everyone who is listening, including my mom and my friends. And I think that's probably it. But I know I really do appreciate it. There's been some good feedback. People are listening, been very kind, and it's kind of quite cool to think that we're chatting about this. I think we really enjoy looking at this stuff, and you guys seem to enjoy listening to it. So if you have any opinions, as people often do, let us know. But otherwise, if you want to follow us on Twitter, that's at Buffy Boys. And it's Buffy Boys on Facebook in the normal Facebook way. It's Buffy_Boys on Instagram. And I'm sure we're on other channels as well. And we're on YouTube and SoundCloud and all random stuff like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on Spotify.
Tumblr, technically.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, because you can just be on Tumblr now.
Okay. People should review us maybe on iTunes. I've never done that. I think it's a thing. People say it's good.
Yeah, actually, that is a thing. If you're
And subscribe
is great because that's really cool to see, and also on either iTunes or any of your podcast apps. If you I certainly leave reviews for things, but I'm an absolute train spotting nerd.
Yeah.
But if you're a normal person and feel inclined to leave a review, that actually be really helpful for us, and will let us know if we're kind of doing the right thing here. But yeah, that's us for this week, and I'm looking forward to the next episode, Brian.
It is
No, Brian. I was giving you space to open your drink and do the thing you're doing. Let me do mine, okay?
Okay, here you go, Joe.
Okay. So
having a beer.
That's us from here at Buffy Boys.
The next episode is
I Robot You, Jane.
We already said that. I Robot You, Jane.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great. Here, clink.
Bye from the Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys. See yous.